Hey, everybody. Welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Davis. I'm here with Mitch.
Yo.
Say hi, Mitch.
Hi, Mitch.
I'm here with John. Yes. And I'm here with John, who's our Director of Accounts and Chief Marketing Officer.
Hi, Mitch.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's like the Waltons. That's how we open up the show now. We're just going to open up the show like, good night, John. Good night. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
I could say good night right now.
Yeah. So you have a story that you started out. You have an origin story of your business, and your story's not sexy. You're kind of like, it's not really that engaging. Doesn't seem interesting. What do I do? So we're going to talk about storytelling in your brand. So grabbing someone's attention in today's world is a difficult thing. There's a lot of noise. So telling your brand story, that's how you're going to capture that attention. But, if your story is, you feel like it's mundane, plain, or boring, well, then what do? Well, my opinion is, first of all, there's no story that's actually that plain or that boring. Maybe uneventful, maybe not as exciting as, obviously someone else's. Not everything's sexy, not everything's boring. And so we're going to talk about that today. Which one of us wants to start on that with an opinion?
For me, I don't know. There are brands and businesses that, as a customer, you don't really need to hear, flash and spiciness from the brand. Like, I think it really is heavily dependent on, of course, on the industry, on the company, on the consumer base. Some brands are totally fine being boring and not. It's out of place for them to try to be extra. You know what I mean? So I don't, it's all about your audience. We're not saying anything new here. It all depends on what your audience expects from you. And if they expect flash and flare, then you need to figure that out. But,
you tend to, I think if you take like, attorneys, for example, where there's you can't walk through the ads without tripping over an ad for an attorney, and where there's so little you can say or do to differentiate yourself from the competition. Some of them really go they go for that kind of flash, kind of a shock and awe sort of approach, simply because you're grasping at straws to find something to make you stand out, since you're all basically competing with the same set of tools and the same features and benefits, and there's very little other ways to compete that are obvious. The Hammer. Look at he spends big money on an animated Super Bowl ad to stand out from the crowd. So that's kind of one of the biggest examples I can think of where, it may not. It's a boring business and a boring product because there's so many of them doing the same thing. So the best way they find to differentiate themselves is to do an ad that's so out of left field or so, like I said, shock and awe, that it just sticks in your brain for that reason only. But you're not using features and benefits and any kind of specific payoff for the customer to really make yourself stand apart.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what do you do exactly? You can have some of that flash and pump, but it's at the end of the day, it's like, would they be somebody that I would call if I had, let's say if I got a divorce, could they help me? I'm kind of going through a crisis. It's a big deal to go through something like that. It's an emotionally trying and devastating event. It's a financially concerning and devastating one as well. And, picking a lawyer that kind of does like this rap motif on his ad on television, that's not the guy that I'm going to say like, hey, my wife, no, I'm not going to call you. You kind of are the epitome of an ambulance chaser at that point. It's just not a good look. So yeah. But when starting out and thinking about like why you got into law, why do you do what you do? What is your passion to do? Why did you start this? Because being a lawyer is not popular. There has to be a reason that you got into this that could be used to communicate why somebody should use you. We talk about the why a lot in NerdBrand because it's not just why you get out of bed and do what you do. It's also why should I buy from you? And there's got to be something there that either record, case study, something, or just simple passion communicated could help to determine
Morgan
that.
and Morgan, I guess, is the antithesis of the Hammers ads, because they talk about how much money they've brought in annually for their clients. They beat up on the insurance companies and how they're not really looking out for you. They really push that, and they also they tell a story of their passion for helping people. So they really go for a more and this is something that we believe. You've got to touch people's hearts if they're going to act. You can throw fact after fact after fact at people, but in the end, what's going to cause them to get up and act is if you hit an emotional chord with them that resonates with them. And
that's the market today.
That's
people,
where Morgan and Morgan kind of they go the other way. They're not the shock and awe. We care about people. We get results. We've been doing this longer and better than anybody else, and they'll throw up some measure of support for that argument. So it can be done.
Yeah. I kind of like you said, it gets an emotional response. It connects. You're trying to connect with people, and just kind of throwing things on the wall to try to connect is not a good way to do it. So, being that this is NerdBrand, let's go look into some examples where some things were a little boring, kind of got dusted off, and oh my God, did they become a juggernaut? Let's look at Thor. The first Thor movie was okay. Thor: The Dark World was...
It was okay, too.
It was okay, but it had a lot of things with it where I was like, it wasn't great. There was a lot of creative issues, of course. But when you get to Ragnarok, holy crap, what a difference. I mean, here's a character that most people thought was a little boring. Like when announced that they're going to do a Thor movie, and I was like, really? Why? And then you get into like looking at the character when he was in Avengers. You're like, okay, he makes sense in an ensemble, but a standalone doesn't. Even Iron Man made fun of him when he first met him. Doth Mother, no, you're worth her drapes, because of that's the way he talked, and he spoke in ways that were very Shakespearean. And by the time you get to Ragnarok, he's talking like a normal guy. He's talking like a modern day-to-day person that you would hear today. And it comes across better.
It's funny because that bit of dialogue that you mentioned that Tony uses in, I guess it's the first Avengers movie, Doth Mother know you're wearing your drapes. It's funny, in a way that was planted a seed for where you could go tonally with Thor in a way that made it resonate with a larger, more diverse audience. They went the humor angle. They took the things that were intrinsically kind of easy to make fun of, the whole Shakespearean kind of classical English kind of stilted angle. And they took that and thought, you know what? That's so outrageous, and there's so much built-in humor for why it's outrageous. Let's use that. So they took what was there and just sort of rebuilt it and took it in a different direction, which I kind of think speaks to the message of the podcast, which is sometimes you've got to kind of take a product and maybe turn it on its head a little bit and look at it from a different angle to find something about it that is maybe that seed of interest, that interesting angle that makes it stand out from the crowd.
Well, I mean, it's like when Guardians of the Galaxy came out, we all know that's when Marvel changed. I mean, you incorporated this much broader universe that had been there, that to this day DC still seems afraid to touch, because they have the same setup. But what they did, I mean, it's brilliant. It's like, here's a talking tree and raccoon, deal with it. That was kind of the strategy, It was like, we're going to do this. And everybody was like, well, this is going to be a really bad movie. This is going to be a stinker. And they got a talking raccoon. What the crap is this? But it kind of set the stage for Ragnarok, later because it was like that same vibe, but it was just a little bit further pushing the envelope on what they were doing with it. And they know they made a little bit of money on Thor, and they made a little bit of money on Thor Dark World. They were like, well, it's going to be the last one. You know, it could have went out with a whimper. They could have played it safe, and they didn't. And now they've got a fourth one coming out, which kind of makes you wonder if they're going to capture lightning in a bottle again, and then we might be podcasting about that, about how that doesn't always work.
Going to the well once too, maybe?
Yeah,
We'll see.
yeah. Another character that I thought was boring, I never was really into him, was Iron Man.
He's never been boring.
Well, to me he is, because he's kind of like a Batman, but an alcoholic. And but of course they couldn't come out and introduce this character in 2008 and kind of do the marketing they wanted to do with a character that was an alcoholic. So they kind of retrofitted in, like, by I think Iron Man 2, he was drinking this stuff that was keeping him going, and I don't know. That's kind of what was done. But yeah, I feel like that they found a way to kind of clean that up and make it fun as well, because it was a fun movie. Iron Man 1 still holds up today. Captain America, there's another one that I found a snooze fest. The first Avenger movie is a movie I watched once and I never went back to it. But I will tell you, The Winter Soldier really gets me. I don't know what it is about it. I know what it is. It's an espionage movie with Captain America and Black Widow.
Totally. It's got a lot more in common with like the Bourne Identity than it does with a standard superhero movie.
Right. So it's kind of got a vibe to it that's like, this is what this movie is. It just has superheroes in it, and that magic works, and it still does. When people take these IPs, these intellectual properties, which are brands, and they take them and they find ways, like you say, to reinvigorate, transform them. I mean, that's kind of the point of the podcast. It's like, your business may have started out with this boring model, but it's not. There's something there that just hasn't been explored to tell it in a different way. But also you have to think about, okay, I've been in business for 30 years. Well, maybe that origin story 30 years ago has not become irrelevant to the branding, but maybe to what you're trying to communicate. Because in 30 years, the audience, people buying behaviors have changed. John, I think you can bring light to that, because what was once a good idea or how a product interacted is not how that product is and looks today. So they've changed their story because events have changed them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I mean, definitely with the amount of digital channels that have sprung up since 2012, the 2011, the introduction of smartphones. I mean, it seems like it was forever ago, but just 10 or 12 years ago. And I was a young lad, but 10 or 12 years ago, the method of communication was exceptionally different. The amount of information people had access to was exceptionally different. And with that, you got this overload of content, of information, of brand messaging, of advertisement, and, even terminology like content shock got dubbed by, I can't remember who exactly in the industry, but basically there's so much content out there that people they go into shock and they can't consume it.
Overwhelming.
Right. So getting your brand message, even if your brand message is so good, even if you have the best story on the planet, you may still not actually get people's attention just because there's such a volume of content, or you may not be able to get it placed in the environments or the publications that you used to rely on, like getting on Harvard Business Review. It's hard for even prominent people to get on there now, whereas 5-7 years ago, if you were a prominent person in your industry, you could pretty much get a spot on there for an article. Now, even if you're an industry leader, someone who's really got notoriety, you're still up against a bunch of other people who have notoriety, and they're also writing really good stuff. So, the the whole landscape changed, obviously. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue differently.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of, it comes down to strategy and creative thought on how you can do it differently and trying new things. Branding is always at the core. I mean, personal branding is becoming more and more and more important and taking more of a center stage. I think a lot of that has to do with business pages on social media outlets are not able to reach as much as a person. People want to talk to that person. They want to get to know that person. I don't know. I don't have as many or as much else to say about that than that and what we have said. I don't know if you guys have more that you think that needs to be said about personal branding and how important it is to kind of work that into your business.
Well, I mean, if you're in a crowded field of competitors, you've got to find something that makes you stand out from that crowd, and it may be it's going to be something more than just features and benefits and what you do better than somebody else. If there's a crowded field of successful businesses doing the same thing, you've got to think a little bit outside the box, and maybe it comes down, you really have to get down and really pull things apart about your story, how you started the business, where you came from, the personalities within your company. I'm trying to think. There's an outdoor company. They make outdoor clothing. It's not Patagonia. Son of a gun. It just went right away. But their advertising. Goes back a few years, but their advertising campaign was basically the woman who owned the company and her son testing these coats and these jackets, and they would show them these ridiculous scenarios with extreme conditions. Kind of caricaturing the punishment that their product could withstand. They took something that was fairly, a crowded field, a crowded industry with, outdoor clothing, which a lot of people make, and a lot of people make very good stuff. But it wasn't they took the qualities about the product and the qualities and personalities of the people who run the company and merged those to create a persona that really did a good job of telling the message in an entertaining way. And we're kind of back to that whole entertainment value of advertising thing. That sticks with people, makes them remember you, and makes them gravitate towards your brand. There's work involved. It's not as simple as I make this and I make this really well so people will want it. Well, why aren't they coming to get it? You've got to give them another reason. You've got to hit them in the heart. You've got to hit them in a way that makes them have an emotional attachment of some kind to your brand to get them to get up and act. And it's a lot of work. It can take a lot of research and not demographic research necessarily, not that kind of research, but inner research about who you are, the personalities within your company, the stories and the qualities within that culture that make you stand apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I know somebody that will telling the story of their business and how they got started, but it all came from an embarrassing moment. They got fired from their other job. And more people related to that and latched onto that to listen to her story than they did, well, me and my sister had an idea to become this, that, blah, 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 That was kind of like, yeah, we've heard that before. But to kind of admit that, hey, I was working at this place and I screwed up and I got fired, and it kind of got me thinking about what am I going to do and why I want to do what I want to do, and now having the freedom to do it and taking a chance, and she did, and it worked out. Whoa, that was really loud. Who's moving around a lot? Anyways, yeah, so she took a chance, and it's like, that it makes a difference. I mean, to kind of be that raw honesty. I think we all know Gary Vayner. Am I saying his name right?
Who?
Vaynerchuk.
Vaynerchuk. You want to talk about a guy that just kind of gets raw. Sometimes I think it's like, I kind of think of him like Zach Bagans on Ghost Adventures. He's kind of become this caricature of himself, and I think that Gary's kind of gotten into that space, and he just kind of has to own it. But he's still very honest, in my opinion. He seems very, he'll tell you how it is, and whether or not if he would admit, like, nah, I was wrong on that. For a very long time, he was advocating TikTok and using that as a way to communicate this message that, like, what we're talking about. And everybody was kind of like, oh, you're nuts. That's not going to be a thing. I mean, I remember saying that to a couple people at a firm I was at, and they were like, TikTok? That's a bunch of, you know, uh, prepubescent teenagers on there making videos. And I'm like, well, tell Will Smith that and all these other people that are starting to jump in at this time, that because that's not the way it is now. Now you have pure TikTok celebrities. I know, John, you've got some opinions on TikTok and some information.
Well, I mean, it's it's the new kid on the block, and you can't argue with it. It's they've done a really good job of making it accessible, I will say, in terms of, I think one of the things they did super well is just the ability to download videos and share them across other social platforms. I think that kind of glossed over how important that was to their adoption and distribution. You can't do that on Instagram. You can't hold your thumb down and download the video and share it elsewhere. You can't really share Instagram to Twitter anymore that effectively. It's just a link. So they did some things super well. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I understand the the adoption of the platform as a whole. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, if I knew that, or if anybody knew why this particular platform went from being Musically to being TikTok, and then all of a sudden just had this, massive draw from the general population. If I had those ingredients, we probably wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Well,
Yeah,
TikTok kind of moved into the space that was left vacant by Vine, don't you think?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, and combined. I mean, I think a lot of its power is that it combined what people liked across most of the platforms. I mean, it's got the entertainment of YouTube. It's got for the younger people, it's got the kind of that close-knit communication and community that Snapchat has, and it's got the look and feel of Snapchat that it takes over your full screen. Instagram, it's got the beauty, I guess, part of Instagram, where it's just like the quality of photos and videos. All right.
Somebody disagreed with you, and they're in your parking lot.
They're
right
clearly
now.
ride's here.
Mitch got an Uber to show up to the show. Wait, what?
That's a semi. You can have it, Mitch. That's your ride.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, TikTok is it's, again, if we all had the magic explanation why it's doing what it's doing, we'd be millionaires. But it's an interesting thing to watch for sure, and how it's not a thing for the kids, and even if it was, I don't buy that argument at all. I mean, like we saw with Vine, so many of the people who are popular on YouTube and popular on TikTok, they're Vine, whatever you want to call them. I mean, it's like a lineage. It's a genetic lineage from Vine. I mean, you look at the Logan Paul and Jake Paul, empire that they've created as just Vine stars, and then they went to YouTube, and guess who their entire customer, their entire audience base is? It's a bunch of kids. It's 22 and under. So, and they've made millions of dollars on merchandise. So to say that kids don't spend money is silly. So I've never really bought into that argument that you can discredit a whole platform just because of an age demographic. I mean, it seems a bit dismissive and silly when we've seen what we've seen with Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and even Facebook. Like, we can all kind of sit back and giggle, but when Facebook opened up to be more than college students, what did every 22 and under, every 16-year-old went on and created a Facebook, moved off of MySpace. So it's like, there's no, I don't really get the mockery of like, oh, that's just a platform for kids. Well, they all are. And then those people grow up.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing that's always underestimated. It's like they look at like the initial through the door right now, like, okay, this is what you can possibly hit. And I've always told people, like, don't be, like you said, dismissive is a great word, because I found that a lot. Mitch, if you're looking up, I can hear you clicking your mouse. So if you're looking up resources, please share anytime you find something. But it's like they always kind of look directly at that opportunity and see, well, it's probably not going to go anywhere. And it's like, but you don't know who they know. You don't know who they could tell you to go talk to, or who knows them, or what kind of influence they may have on whatever it is you're trying to, offer or tell a story to or communicate with. You never know. That's the thing, And I think that's what's happened with TikTok. It's like there's people that are making like business money, big money off of being on there, doing what they're doing, because TikTok doesn't run ads. So it's like, at least not that I know of. I've never seen an ad. Do they now?
It's very
Okay,
limited. I mean, it's kind of the way Spotify was. That it's like a $10,000 minimum spend. So it's pretty exclusive still to the big brands. But yeah, anytime you open the app, the very first thing you see is an ad. I mean, I've seen some from Apple. Trying to think of some other. It's all big brands with big budgets, of course.
Yeah, and that may be the best way for them to stay with and keep doing it that way, because I think if you get down into the Facebook weeds of like, oh, you can run a $50 ad, well, that ad is not going to do. I mean, I'd rather take my $50 and spend it on a pizza, some Cokes, and ice cream, because it's like, and toilet paper and other things that right now the store's out of.
It depends, though. It depends. I mean, think about the early days of advertising on Facebook. You could drop $50 in and get 100,000 impressions just by the way of the engagement, the way the algorithm rewards content. And TikTok's the same. I mean, that's its money maker right now. That's why everybody is drawn in. From a marketing standpoint, from a creator standpoint of referring to content creators, that is the draw. It's a huge opportunity to come in and take advantage of an algorithm that isn't overloaded with content, just like we were talking about. TikTok isn't a part of that content shock yet. There's still a ton of open, basically, inventory for people to come in and create a presence, and the algorithm rewards that super heavy, just like in the early days of Facebook, just like the early days of Instagram. Eventually, for the same reasons, they will have to dial back, and if they ever want to make revenue, they will have to open the advertising up. But and as the feed gets more populated, just like with Facebook, there's a narrowing of the funnel that has to come to fruition as you have a certain number of users using your platform. They have to start ranking content. They have to start prioritizing content, or it's just going to be a endless feed of a lot of garbage, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good point that I'm glad you brought up about prioritizing content, because it's, anytime that I deal with a social media outlet, my first instinct is to just put a bunch of stuff out there and see what somebody latches onto, and then do that. I don't know if that's I don't buy in that that's a solid strategy, but I stick to one thing and just keep doing it until people catch wind of it, and then see how the popularity goes with it. And then that becomes my main piece that I put out all the time, that I know people either look to or expect from me. And then every now and then I may add something else to kind of see, how does that perform? How does that do? And it's a very long process, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you're going to see a lot about the podcast and teasers and things like that. Every now and then I'm going to drop in an article that somebody else did. I'm just going to share with something that somebody else did. I may post a blog post from our brand. I may just do something completely different. It may just be an image, a case study, or whatever. I sprinkle in. But the main thing you're going to find is that. And I think that, John, you talked about how there needs to be something you rest on.
Yeah, an anchor. You need a constant anchor. Yeah. You need something consistent that it should resonate with your audience. And so you've got to test, like you were saying, to find that particular anchor, whether it's a podcast, a newsletter, just a theme. Gary Vee is a good example of, he's probably the most prevalent example, and one that you can easily find and see examples. The guy's constantly testing. He's testing different types of content. He's testing videos that have the subtitles on the top and bottom, the black bars. He's doing, regular videos, inspiration videos, aspiration, just straight education. He's doing his speaking videos, so he's out there constantly testing. And I think it kind of goes to Mitch's point. Being able to do that is 100% dependent on who you have inside your business, or in some ways, as an agency partner. But it's very dependent on who you have in your business. Do you have content people or content-minded people within your company? Do you have the skill set to try these different content types and repurpose a blog post into a YouTube video quickly, where it doesn't take 4 months to do it? And then to actually have that stuff go out into a live environment and have the skill set internally or with an agency to say, all right, this type of content or this video did well, or this segment of a video did well. And I like Gary. I've watched him for years. I've kind of, fallen to the wayside on some of his shtick, but he's still, you can't knock the guy. He does what he does extremely well, and it's successful. It works.
Yeah, just a sidebar. Jonathan said shtick, not.
What did you think I said? Say the rope.
I'm just saying, for people that have, for any audio qualities we currently have
Dave
right
isn't
now
here.
and all. Yeah, no discussions about, what logos look like. Go ahead, John.
Well, to some degree now we've kind of circled back around to the idea. I mean, Jonathan was talking about testing, and it goes back to the whole philosophy that brands are now they have to be content creators, and the value of having content for consumers is the ability to put a lot of different things in front of them and testing to help refine your message. So you have to be in that mindset that in order to build your brand message, you have to have a mindset that says we are putting things out there in these mediums for our both our brand loyalists and people who we want to become brand loyalists that want to make them gravitate toward us. So we have to be creating content. Now, again, it gets this whole idea of finding your brand's voice and your message and determining who am I to my customers is a lot of work. And, whether you've got people internally that can help you do it, or you look outside, if you want to succeed, if you want to be a successful brand these days, you have to have that mindset.
I would encourage people to look outside, just because of the fact that there's a bias that's going to happen. I mean, I know that I'm kind of saying like hire us because we can, of course, we're outsiders, but yeah, you got to go outside. It's Mitch, you've said it before. We all hold up a mirror and we see ourselves a certain way, and we need to have you just need to have a better view of that. And I don't think you're going to get that by hiring a person internally and having them go through that, because they're going to have I just don't think they're going to be that. They're not an outsider anymore.
They're inside the bubble.
They're in the bubble.
You don't need a mirror, because your perception of who you are is different than how people perceive you outside that, on the other side of that mirror. People don't see the same thing you do. You're being inside your own company culture prevents you from seeing yourself the way the consumer sees you. That's the value of having an outside entity to partner with, to develop your marketing and your message and determine what the face of your company looks like, sounds like, feels like. You need an objective observer who can and has the ability to tell you the things maybe you don't necessarily want to hear, but because they're coming from an objective standpoint, they have more credibility than somebody that's maybe inside your organization.
Yeah, there's no fear of losing a job or not getting that bonus or whatever it may be, or just pleasing the boss, because a lot of times people just want to please the boss. And that's a very admirable trait, and everybody wants to have that as in their employees. But sometimes they're afraid to say like, this kind of stinks. This doesn't seem right. This could probably be better. And you don't know if your boss is like married to that, like really hardcore. I mean, we've come across that. I know you have, especially Mitch, where you're like the logo is like sacred, and you're like, but it looks old.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have. I mean, and it's not that we just it's not that we come before a client and just give them just our opinions based on whatever our opinions may be. I mean, we live in a data-driven world. I mean, it's kind of always been that way, but now we have access to much better and much more refined data. So the decisions that we make and the conclusions we come to with a client are based on information. They're based on objective data. It's not just about, well, this is what we think looks nice, or this is what we think sounds nice. That doesn't help you at all. It's based on the information we've gleaned about who your customers are, what these customers want, what their expectations are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is your message, or this is your identity. This is what you should look like. This is what you should sound like. This is because the people that want to buy your product react to these things because we've seen the information that tells us that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, I want to hit this one final, in my opinion, boring character. I think I've talked the first three of Marvel. I'm going to hit a DC character now. Yeah. Superman. Yeah. I mean, I like Superman. But he's over. It's just boring. I mean, there's no good story that I've seen
he's
yet.
a big dummy.
Oh, okay. Send all your hate mail to Jonathan at.
Here's the thing about Superman. Tell me where I'm wrong. But
You're wrong.
At least let me give you something to base that.
I'm sorry.
He's a messianic character. He's Jesus with a cape. He's near infallible. He's invulnerable. He's almost omnipotent. He has no weaknesses except his allergy to some particular kind of rock or mineral, being bird kryptonite.
Or magic. Don't forget magic.
But it makes him those qualities are what makes him boring. There's no conflict. There's no weakness. There's no vulnerability. Yeah. He's not human. So it makes him difficult to relate to. Don't get me wrong. There's things I've always liked about Superman because I'm a comic book nerd. Otherwise, I wouldn't be one. There's things about him that can be interesting. But generally speaking, there's a pretty shallow ceiling as far as the depth of stories you can tell about him because he's so perfect.
Right. Well, speaking of stories, I have an idea for a fix, and I'm going to read it. And if there's some studio heads listening to this, then you may contact us, and let's make it happen. Because I'd love to see just some practical, just a story. And it kind of goes back to what I said about Winter Soldier with Captain America. You have an espionage film with superhero in it. So this is sort of like a horror investigative kind of film with Superman. So a child is reported to be suffering from severe abuse, but doctors are not sure. It's speculated he's afflicted possibly with a neurological disorder. Amazingly, this has gained momentum in the community due to a social media post video shared. The video disturbed many people and went viral, thus gaining the attention of Clark Kent during a slow news week. So Clark begins to investigate whether this is a home abuse case, a disorder, or simply a hoax perpetrated by the parents. But upon investigating, things become apparent that this is not a job for Superman, but for someone more familiar in the dark arts, as the child seems possessed by something. John Constantine is sought out, and with Superman's help, they discover the demon Nergal is trying to break through and raise his army to war against mankind. But with all their might and power, you need a demon to fight one. Therefore, enter the demon Etrigan. And so that's just kind of a synopsis of how I think Superman could be handled. So he's not the main character in this that's going to fix it. Yeah, he kind of falls into the background, but he's still there because you do need somebody that's going to enter this supernatural world that can probably take a hit from a demon and not die, But I think it's kind of an interesting premise. I mean, these are characters that I like, John Constantine and the demon Etrigan I've talked about before. Putting that together with Superman, I think you could make a movie out of this, and I think it'd be interesting because it's sort of like The Exorcist meets Superman. It would definitely be, and John Constantine.
A twist. What's interesting is, talking cinematically, I mean, you could make similar arguments to some degree, I guess, about Captain America and the difficulty with writing stories around him. But he has vulnerabilities. Even though he is kind of boring because he's Mr. Goody Two-Shoes and he always does what's right, which reduces the amount of conflicts necessarily that he has to deal with, internally, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, but it's amazing. he became the glue that sort of held the Avengers together. But they don't seem to, on the other side, you look at DC and what they've been doing. They've been almost unable to do that same thing, maybe because they haven't tried to make Superman the glue guy.
Well, the Superman's not the glue guy. I mean, I think that era has passed. I honestly think Wonder Woman should be the glue just because of the fact of the emotional attachment that's there and how she relates to characters. If you watch her movie, if you watch how she interacts with other characters, there's more of an emotional connection, I think, that relates to audiences today. I think that Batman can't be that glue. Batman's always been sort of resistant to teams anyway because he's a loner. So to shove him into that universe, I think, has always been a bad idea, to try to make him like the Iron Man or the Captain America of DC Universe. But, that's just me, in my opinion. I'm not saying Wonder Woman because, of the current culture today. I'm really not. I'm just saying it's just different. It's just a different way of looking at it because again, like we've been saying, she's an outsider who's in this world and is like, but wait a minute, that's not normal. I don't think you could get that from Hal Jordan and Green Lantern. I don't think you could get that from anyone unless Hawkman or Hawkgirl. And I just kind of feel that way about it. I don't know. Maybe I think that we'll see DC making some improvements, and we'll see what happens with that. That's a good point to bring up, though, that they do need a front man. They need a David Lee Roth.
I mean, not necessarily a front. It's just that emotional core to there's somebody that represents the emotional core of the team.
Yeah.
Well,
I think she's perfect for that.
They haven't found it. I mean, if they haven't determined that, they haven't really sold it that way. They haven't written it that way.
Yeah. But the point is like, this is a movie idea, and but making up a story is really not the answer. We're saying it's every story is about redemption, or maybe a rediscovery, or interpretation is needed, and that's kind of what we're saying with your brand. The point of the Superman story here is it's not an origin story; it's just a story, and that may be enough to reinvigorate your brand. Maybe it started out that you crashed in a field and were adopted by Ma and Pa Kent, but later on you got reshaped by circumstances and differences in the economy and the world and what happened, and now this is your identity and this is who you embrace and who you are, and you need to tell that because that hits people today more than what actually happened. You can still have that and retain that old story because there is an origin there, but in order to, I think, to relate, a story is something it's not just told once. It's it's constantly evolving. It's constantly happening, which goes into the content generation thing we're talking about. You're constantly telling your story. You're making stories, kind of like micro stories inside of a big old story, kind of like those dolls, Russian dolls, I guess. But it kind of leads us to like rediscovering your why. Rediscovering, is it worth it? Because after years of your struggling or thriving, or if your brand suffers from a disconnect, your story may feel boring because of that. So if it's old, if it's time to start over and you come a long way, have you told that story? This is where we start to close out the show. So think about it. We all evolve in some way. People come into our lives, customers, partners. What changed that set you onto a new path today that's reshaped your why? And if you need help telling your why, you can go to nerdbrandagency.com and reach out and talk to us. We'd love to help you do that.
Yeah, just kind of on to add to that, you look at big brands who frequently rebrand. You look at brands that are constantly changing their positioning. It's not something you should wait to do necessarily until you're up against a wall or you feel like your business isn't moving. It's something to do on, think of it more as offense versus defense. Giving yourself a fresh look, getting a new website, getting new brand messaging, new creative done. I mean, that shouldn't happen when you're like, oh crap, we're not selling quite as well as we used to. No, it should happen well before that. You should constantly be evolving. You see that's why big brands are successful. They're constantly recreating that story. Even if it's not significant, they're giving themselves a fresh look. They're giving people a reason to look at them, to listen to what they might be saying slightly differently. So just because I feel like we get a lot of clients who come to us when things are not the best. they feel stale. They feel like it's been a long time, and their sales are starting to suffer as a result. It should have happened probably 2 years before that to create a new story, to create some buzz, to make an opportunity for some PR, to give yourself something to share on social media and through your emails, and instead of your standard day-to-day, promotional stuff or whatever. So it's just something for people out there that maybe business owners, think about it now. Don't wait until you've got a gun to your head and you're doing it out of desperation more than strategy and trying to be fresh.
Yeah. When the house is burnt down and smoldering and you're in the front yard in a tent, now's not the time to think about maybe putting the fire out.
Or like thinking about repainting the walls. Like, no, paint the walls before the fire.
Yeah. I mean, there's something obviously not working, and the strategy will help you see that and fix that and make those adjustments to improve those things.
Even if it's working,
maybe going.
I think that's
exactly.
Even if it's working, it's still time to sit down and say, what are we saying to our audience? What are we aesthetically giving off? It can always be improved. There's always an opportunity to do things better and differently. So yeah, that's me 2 cents.
That's your 2 cents. Yeah. So I think that kind of gives an idea of why a vision is more important than a business plan. Business plans are good. Not saying they're not, but if you don't have a reason for it, you don't have it. It can't be to make money. That's not a vision.
That's an income.
I've had people. Yeah, that's an income. That's a goal. You go do that anywhere. The vision is what's going to drive and inspire people to come alongside you to do the thing that you need done, that you feel passionately about, that needs to happen. And you do that through business. It is possible. I know it's not a charity. I'm not saying your business is a charity. I'm not equating it to that. But there is people out there that need what you have, and you love what you do. And if you love what you do, well, you can. There is a pathway in this world for you to be able to get paid for that and to share that. So we'd love to talk to you. You can find us at nerdbrandagency.com. You can listen to us at nerdbrandagency.com/podcast. We're also rolling out availability for some sponsorships. Now, these are free. So if you have a business and you'd like to say a few words, plug you, talk about your website so they hear your domain, whatever it is, you can contact us at nerdbrandagency.com/podcast. Tell us your business, tell us what it is, but you can also go, if you're interested in sponsors, you can go to nerdbrandagency.com/sponsor, and I will read on a script of your business. We'll plug you for free. Who's going to do that? We are. That's who. So we're hoping that we get some folks that want to submit some stuff. We'll read them out loud. We'll say, hey, go check out so-and-so. This podcast is sponsored by, and you can go to that /sponsored page on our website and kind of get all the information and what that looks like. Because we'll also blast out your logo on our snippets and stuff and clips of the show on social media. So, you guys got anything else you want to add before we close it out?
You're saying about the difference between a business need and the difference between a vision and something like paying customers. You have to have paying customers. You have to have that. That's not a vision. If you're gonna have a business, you got to have that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's wise if you're going to put a business plan together that alongside your business plan, you're also putting together a marketing plan, because the two things have to work together. That's why it's more difficult that once you develop a business plan, then go back after, oh, wait, we need a marketing plan. Well, your marketing plan needs to fit in with the pieces of your business plan. So if you think about those two things simultaneously, it makes the process of marketing your business a lot simpler.
Yeah. Don't put marketing before everything else that we've talked about. I mean, it's a process. It starts with that message and branding, and then you get to the creative, and then you get to the digital properties like web, and then you get to marketing, and it's got to all work together. It's an orchestra. I don't think it's interesting to see a conductor stand in front and just have a guy playing a flute. I don't think people pay $200 a ticket to go listen to that.
That'd be kind of funny.
It would be kind of funny, though. I mean, just to kind of do that as a video to kind of illustrate our points that we're making here, I think that's something we may end up doing just for giggles.
We'll let you handle it.
Fine, I'll be the
Nobody
conductor.
wants
Mitch,
that.
you have to play the flute. So
Nobody wants
nah,
that.
you just blow into it and just
I am not Jethro
make it
Tull.
happen.
Which Jethro Tull is that person? That's a band I know. That actually
All
plays
right. And I think on that note, that's going to end up closing out the show. Appreciate everybody listening. I hope everybody had a great Halloween last weekend. It's now November. It's crazy right now. I'm not going to mention why it's crazy. We all know why it's crazy. Just focus on turkey in 2 to 3 weeks, and maybe it'll make you all feel better. But appreciate you listening to the podcast. And everybody, remember out there, keep your nerd brand strong.